Hey, how y'all doing? It's Rick Sincere with MTMV Sports, y'all. I am blessed, geeked, overjoyed to be here with the one and only Mr. Emory Hunt of CBS Sports and Football Game Plan. Listen, you know him from, if you don't know him, something's wrong with you, and you're not really in this whole draft thing. You're not really in this football thing. You're not really about that life if you don't really know Mr. Emory Hunt himself. Killing it on Twitter, and also the running back rankings heard around the world. So we're gonna get into that in just a second. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fine, man. I appreciate you bringing me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Let's hop in. Let's not bury the lead. You ranked. Listen, this has been so many responses from Twitter, and I just kind of been following. You're a great follower on Twitter, by the way. Um, because you put out your rankings, you put out your stuff, and then you go back and forth with people if they have stuff to say about your rankings. And one thing that kind of got everybody in a bit of a tizzy was your rankings of the running backs, and you putting Jahmyr Gibbs above Bijan Robinson. Talk to me about what the response has been like, and then how have you been dealing with the people who have a little bit of criticism?
They have a full right to whatever they want to feel about it. But I do work for myself. I do work for what I do it for and what I have done since 2007. So you don't really base what you do off other people's feelings. Feelings are emotional, and when people are emotional, they tend to lash out. Like it's funny. So you put your rankings out there, you let it sit, and you just sit back and just watch it play out. It's just like a scout would do. Here's my report. We'll see how it works out. I see it's rather quiet about my Carson Wentz report from 2016, as opposed to what it was in 2016, and when folks were all over, just like you saw yesterday. But now it's quiet. But again, when you're doing it for scouting report purposes, and it's funny because the football people all know what I'm talking about. The fantasy football people are the ones that have the issue. So it's and the reports are not for fantasy anyway. It can be used for fantasy, and some are using it the right way. But for most, it's just people lashing on the internet trying to get engagement. And I made their day for on a Thursday.
Sir, shots fired. You said it's quiet now about Carson Wentz. I love that. I love that response. One of the reasons you had Jahmyr Gibbs ranked above Bijan Robinson was just because of the elite level quickness and the speed and the game breaking ability. Talk to me about Bijan Robinson's speed and his game breaking ability. I've seen a lot of comparisons to Saquon Barkley, and Saquon Barkley has that game breaking ridiculous speed. When you look at Bijan Robinson, do you see that all the time on film?
I don't see the comparison to Saquon Barkley. Bijan to me just like I put in the video. He's explosive. He has good speed, game breaking speed. He has the ability to catch the ball down the backfield. He does a lot of things that I like about Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs just does it a little bit more explosive in an explosive manner. And I know people are putting this big thing on. Oh, he's 199, as if he can't gain a pound. So if he was 200 pounds, nobody would have an issue. But because he's 199 in a situation where he probably lost weight to run faster at the combine, and probably played during the season at about 205, 210, hey, listen, he can gain weight, and he's still explosive. He's still dynamic. He's still the same back he was at Georgia Tech that he was at Alabama. And Bijan has been the same back he has been since he got to Texas. So it's almost like you can't like two musicians at the same time. This whole draft conversation is becoming like the basketball conversation with MJ or LeBron. Like they both can be great.
I love that. Talk to me about Deuce Vaughn, Tajay Spears, Keaton Mitchell. How did they find themselves in your top five?
They're super elite. And for full scout reports, people can go and check out footballgameplan.com/2023 draft guide. I have the full scouting report there. So I won't get into the full detail, but just know that one common element that these guys have in the top five: explosive, game breakers, ability to do things on both ends of offense, catching the ball and also helping out in the return game, being a very good runner with vision. So all five backs in that top five uh, carry those same elements, because for me, being at that position, you got to have the vision. You want to be someone that, hey, we could put the ball in your hands at any point on the field and you have a chance to go the distance. And so when you look at that and try to project that in terms of how you look at offense, give me those guys that are super explosive to have a chance to ring that cash register up on any given carry.
Listen, I am very much like you in the sense that I love speed and I love to see a guy who can go the distance at any point. And that's attractive to me. It makes me feel like, hey, that's worth a draft pick. So I want to ask you this question overall: who are those guys for you in this draft? Who are those elite and outside of the running backs that we've already mentioned, right? At wide receiver, at tight end, like who are those guys for you? Even at quarterback, who are those guys for you? Who are those game breaking elite level guys?
It's honestly, it's far too many to name. But when you think about elite, you're thinking about guys that can help change whatever side of the ball you're on. So for me, you look at quarterback, any one of the three guys, Stroud, Richardson, or Bryce Young. I'm fine with. You talk about the running back position, you look at Jackson Smith and Jigba, Zay Flowers, those guys defensively. You're thinking about Will Anderson. You're thinking about these cornerbacks and Christian Gonzalez and offensive line. There's a bunch of good guards and tackles. I'm a big Osiris Torrance fan. I think those guys are when you think about can he step in and help change the trajectory of my offense or my defense, are the ones that you really like and focus on.
You know what? Thinking about the question, you're absolutely right. There are way too many to name. But I do want to hop into the one that you just mentioned, Jackson Smith and Jigba. You had him in your mock draft going above Zay Flowers. You had Zay Flowers going at 12 to the Texans to replace Brandon Cooks, which I love the pick, by the way. But talk to me about Jackson Smith and Jigba, who isn't one of those game breaking speed guys, right? But talk to me about why you have him kind of ranked above some of the faster guys in like a Zay Flowers or Quentin Johnston.
Well, he's a very good receiver. He's a good football player. And for me, Zay Flowers he has the higher grade out of all the receivers I've ranked. He has a 90. Jackson Smith and Jigba is my number one slot receiver, but I feel like he is also able to play on the outside. He's a catch and run guy. He's someone that does a great job at working himself open, receiving the ball, and is a fantastic player after the catch. So when you have that ability, you can be successful at a high level in the NFL. You could be a Tyler Boyd within an offense where you could flirt between going outside or going inside, float between going outside, going inside, and then have the same success. So I feel like he is a really good receiver. Someone's going to get themselves a talent at the position.
Love it. So the question about I heard a comparison to from Zay Flowers to Tyreek Hill, right? And that was kind of one of the comparisons that was made. Talk to me about that comparison. Do you see him having that type of impact, even if he doesn't have maybe the speed isn't exactly the same, but do you see him having that type of impact on an offense?
Absolutely. He's explosive in all directions. Every time he touches the ball, he's explosive. When he runs his routes, he's explosive. You look at what they're doing down there in Miami with both he and Jalen Waddle. I envision that type of success for a Zay Flowers. So I feel like he's another one. If folks watch him on film at Boston College, he was always open. He was open a lot. They just didn't have the quarterback play to get him the football. So you factor in that he's going to get better quarterback play in the NFL than he did at Boston College. And we're going to see a lot of big plays coming from Mr. Flowers.
I like the fact that you bring up better quarterback play. And let's talk about these quarterbacks. You had Will Levis kind of falling a little bit in your mock draft. And you had Anthony Richardson as well, kind of, still in the top 10, right? Talk to me about where you see these quarterbacks ranked. I know it's clear at the top, but do you see Anthony Richardson above Will Levis in your mind?
Yeah, my grades are Richardson, Young, and Stroud in that order, and all have the same grade. So it doesn't. The reason why in the mock draft that you're talking about, I had those guys go to those specific places because for me, I'd rather see those guys go to those specific places because I feel like they are better fits for what each guy does. And so I like the fact that all three can be, plug and play guys, can play early and play really well. Levis, I'm not as sold on. I feel like he's already reached his ceiling. What you see is what you're going to get. And I feel like he's more of a day two day 3 type talent as opposed to someone that's being catapulted into the top 10.
Why do you believe that the narrative is so, I guess, a little bit down on Anthony Richardson?
Some people don't see it until he saw it already. Back in July when I threw out there that Richardson was my number one quarterback, this was before the season. This is him coming off not being a full-time starter at Florida, and people thought I was crazy. Then after his first game against Utah, everyone kind of flipped and started overhyping the fact, oh, he's going to win the Heisman. This is a guy, and then they fell off when they lost to Kentucky. But now we go back to him being in everybody's top 10. Well, what changed? If you were doing real film work in the summer, you saw the potential, and it shouldn't have taken multiple chances for you to figure out that this dude could play. So he's always been someone that doing the work exclusively and extensively last year over the summer and watching the games from 2021. It was kind of easy to see that this dude got has the goods.
So the real question is, do you believe that all this, this I don't know, these negative thoughts about him will actually play themselves out in the draft? Could he be one of those guys that falls?
It's possible. We've seen Lamar Jackson fall, and look how dumb that was. So, at the
Amen.
end of the day, it's not about when these guys go, because if you go later, you probably go into a better team and a better situation. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where these guys go in terms of when they go. So if he goes number one or if he goes in the 5th round, he is still Anthony Richardson. That's the thing.
I love it. Do you think he'll have that type of Lamar Jackson impact? I hope so, but do you believe that?
He has potential to be, and that's the thing. He doesn't have the higher grade on. I don't have the higher grade on him that I had on Lamar. And Richardson obviously has some things he has to work on, but for the most part, when you talk about what he has, the fact that he's 20 and the fact that he's going to get better, you gamble on the upside and also the potential.
Let's talk. Okay. So I want to go into your thoughts about the offensive tackle. You mentioned the big guys in the trenches. You had Skoronski going at 11, right? And then DeJuan Jones at 13 over guys like Darnell Wright, Anton Harrison, who you had kind of later in your mock draft. As you look at these offensive tackles, do you believe that we're going to see a run on them early in the draft?
It's possible. It's highly possible. It depends on how the league views the position. And usually, when you see the teams start to take a position early, they feel like, okay, I got to get the best one I can right now. And then other teams that have needs at those positions tend to follow suit. So yeah, we can see. Plus, teams have a lot of offensive line needs as well. There's a bunch of teams right in the middle that you can make a case for taking an offensive lineman. So I can definitely see that happening in the 1st round.
So I love the fact you mentioned how they value, right? How teams value certain positions. Where do you see the most value in this draft? Because I mean, I don't know if this draft has, one of those guys who's like a can't miss guy, right? But where do you see the most value in this 1st round at least?
Oh, in the 1st round, it's tough because it all has to tie up with what a team needs. If you need a quarterback, there's tremendous value. If you need an offensive lineman, tremendous value. If you need a running back, tremendous value. It all depends on what you need and where you are to see, oh, I can get a Zay Flowers or a Jackson Smith and Jigba or someone, I can, or Jordan Addison or someone like that. I can get those guys. So it all depends on what you need, because when you're in the 1st round, it's all value because you're at the top of the draft pool, selecting one of the top 32 players in the class.
So with that being said, it seems like there's value all across the 1st round. And I noticed in your mock draft you didn't have any trades. Do you believe there'll be a lot of trade activity in this draft? And where do you see that trade activity happening? Early in the 1st, mid 1st, late 1st, or in later rounds?
I think in the first part of the 1st round completely will have trades, and it's hard to predict trades. That's why I don't put them in my mock draft. And any mock draft I do is based on what I would do. Because if you're trying to, speculate what's going to happen based off what you heard, everybody has sources and everybody has all these leaks and everybody has all this information, but everybody's always surprised what happens on draft day, despite having all that information, all the sources, all the leaks, all the people they are the inside. Someone knows someone. So that's why I just avoid all that and just do it straight 1 through 30, 31 in this case, and just pick how I feel like a team should pick.
I love that. And one of the moments that I love about watching the draft, you mentioned this, right? With all this knowledge and with all this insight, right? Everybody always looks at draft day and go, huh? What? It happens every time. And it happens not only with trades happening, but it also happens with names that come off the board in the first round. And one thing I love about it, one thing everybody who loves Emory Hunt loves about Emory Hunt is the names that other people are not focused on. You gave some examples of those, or at least how you rate people. You had Julius Brents going to the Chargers in the first, Darius Rush going to the Ravens in the first, John Michael Smith going to the Giants in the first, Stevenson going to the Bengals. How many times do you believe in this upcoming draft will you see these guys going in the first round?
I want to say, and again, I don't have the analytics on this or the statistics on this, but you're probably going to see at least 5 guys every draft that was not mocked in first rounds of a lot of these mock drafts that go in the first round. So it's funny because when you're watching the draft, you're like, oh wow. And that's why I hate draft talk, because it's such a limited conversation that we in the media have created, instead of expanding the conversation to include more prospects and really have back and forths on the talk. Everyone right now is still talking about the doggone 3 quarterbacks, 4 quarterbacks. It's a week before the draft, 6 days before the draft, and we're still talking about guys that we've talked about for 2 years. So when someone goes in the first round that we hadn't talked about, everybody's like, well, what the hell is this team doing? What's going on? And it's like, well, this guy always has been here. We just need to expand the conversation. So that's why I like seeing guys that, you like seeing your Cole Strange go in the first round, and people are like, well, what the hell are they doing? And it's like, no, this dude's a really excellent offensive lineman. It's a shame that we just didn't get a chance to talk about him, because we were constantly talking about this one guy, in the draft that, he had this funny, song, or he had this viral clip, or the same guy we've been talking about. And you have 6 million mock drafts and 6 million versions of the mock drafts that recycle the same 31 players across each team. So you kind of get tunnel vision and focus on those guys, thinking that those guys are who the NFL is viewing as first round picks, when there's always about 5 guys that'll jump in the first round that no one has been talking about.
So let's expand the conversation a little bit. I love where you're going with this, because that's exactly where we're headed.
I'm
We
talking
have,
about as a media
that's
commodity.
true.
Like expand the conversation.
So okay, let's expand it here. Let's talk about Aiden O'Connell. Let's talk about Sean Tucker. I want to know your thoughts on those 2 quarterbacks. This question comes from our guy, Professor Dante, who is a big time Emory Hunt believer. You have any conversation with my guy, and you ask him about his rankings, and he was like, "Hey man, according to my guy Emory Hunt, it's like this, it's like that." So, and I asked him if he had a question for you. He definitely wanted to talk about Aiden O'Connell and Sean Tucker and get your thoughts on those 2 players.
I like O'Connell's toughness. I like the fact that he's going to compete. You never feel like Purdue is out of a game with, even someone that, has mistakes early in the game. He's able to overcome those and continue to fight, continue to battle. Very strong arm, but the problem is he only throws one speed. Everything is a fastball, has to really develop touch. The timing tends to be off a little bit, but again, you love the competitiveness and you love the toughness. I think he could be a very solid QB2 for a football team. And for Sean Tucker, I feel like he's undervalued. No one's talking a lot about him. He had some really great years at Syracuse, but the injuries, kind of always plagued him. And that's going to be the conversation. So that kind of relegates his role projecting forward. He's going to be someone that's going to be probably an RB2, situational guy in that regard. But I like his burst. He reminds me a lot of Stephen Ridley when he played for the Patriots, guy that came out of LSU. Same type of running style, same type of build, same type of burst ability. So I like Tucker. I wish he would have had a full bill of health, because he would have been able to, to do a lot of the things in the offseason that people wanted to see.
Do you see any one of those guys going in like the first 4 rounds?
I mean, you say first 4 rounds, you talking about 100. Who knows? It's possible. Listen, I don't. That's why I don't do projections, man. Like because you just never know with the draft. You never know. So, um, put it this way: they could be in the NFL next year.
I love it. Lindsey Scott Jr., you did an awesome job on your small school mock draft. And we're going to dive into that into just a second. But you talked about Lindsey Scott Jr. You had him at the very top of that small school mock draft. Talk to me about give me your thoughts on him.
He's a phenomenal quarterback, man. Just a true point guard at the position. 60 touchdown passes, almost 70% completion percentage. 10 rushing touchdowns. Just this close to getting to the national title game. I felt like they should have beaten North Dakota State. Goes out to the NFLPA Bowl, plays exceptionally well, earns himself an opportunity in the USFL, getting drafted second overall by the Pittsburgh Maulers. So if things in the NFL doesn't work out, he already has an opportunity. Yeah, he's an older player, but man, he's so phenomenal with the football. He's such a really good quarterback and processor, and can touch every level of the field with every throw he makes. It's a really good decision, and you have to throw 60 touchdown passes. And it's not like a lot of these touch passes or dump offs. Like he is legitimately a working touchdown to check down.
The Saints worked him out about a month ago, and I know you're a New Orleans guy. How would you feel about that addition?
Well, they would need someone. They need a third quarterback. I know they have the Taysom Hill thing that they like to play around with, but why not? You have Jameis there for a year. You have Taysom Hill being that kind of wildcat, player. Why not bring somebody in that you can kind of develop and groom and help him be that guy that you want him to be moving forward? Forever long you keep Derek Carr, and at the end of the day, if you plan to re-sign Jameis again or let him walk, at least you would have a younger option. Even though again he's an older player, as the case with a lot of these guys in this class, it would make sense.
This is an old class. No, I'm glad you pointed that out. It really is. I'm gonna point out this is the last one we'll talk about. Because I know you have so much stuff to do, so I just want to hop into this last conversation about your small school mock draft. You had tight end Kamari Everett going at 15 to the Packers. You had Isaiah Bowden going to the Steelers. Mark Evans of Arkansas Pine Bluff going 25th to the Giants. Four guys I did not see. And maybe you can give me some insight on this. Xavier Smith from FAMU, Isaiah Land from FAMU, Aubrey Miller from Jackson State, and this is the one I really want to dive into after we talk about the first three. Celebration Bowl 21 MVP Saquon Davis or Shaq Davis. I didn't see him there either. Help me. Why didn't those guys make it into your first round?
Well, I went strictly off my ranking. So, and also what team needs. If you go and look at the mock draft that I did, how many linebackers went in the mock draft, and so just it wasn't the fit for a Land or an Aubrey Miller, even though I think highly of those guys. Just teams don't need linebackers immediately, right? In terms of Smith, I have other receivers rated higher than Smith. Smith is a very good receiver, good slot receiver, but I have to stay true to my board and take the guys that I feel like are the better players. And so for Davis, same thing. Not many teams need wide receivers that early. And then if I'm working through my board, I'm gonna just go rank and file. This is the number one guy. This is the number two guy, and work it that way.
Love the explanation there. But do talk to me because I feel like at the end of 2021, right, when you saw South Carolina State beating Jackson State, Saquon Barkley, I mean, not Saquon Barkley, Shaq Davis was all the rage. He went on to have a really good season this year as well in the MEAC, and still the MEAC's most feared weapon, right? And you got a chance to see him in some of those outside bowl games. Talk to me about the outlook or the view on Shaq Davis, and could he possibly fall out of this draft?
It's that's a possibility as well. I mean, what I thought last year was a great HBCU class. They only had a few guys drafted. And we saw Quill Glass fall out of the draft completely. And he was one of the best quarterbacks to come out, I thought, since Tavares Jackson. coming from the HBCU ranks. So to see him fall completely out, and that's why I said the draft is just so bizarre because you never really know. But Shaq Davis is a really good receiver. So is Jadakiss Bonds. Both big guys that can get down the field. But the NFL tends to be, if you're not of the elite athleticism or testing well, they tend to, push you down the list. So that's why you don't see as many small college guys get drafted anymore like you used to, because now a lot of the small school guys, first of all, a lot of these programs have transitioned into FBS programs, so that the group of 5 level, and a lot of those, it's just by how the funnel goes. A lot of the better athletes start at Power 5 and they work their way down. So, and that's just how the NFL goes in terms of drafting.
And last thing is there a guy that, because you cover everything. I'm talking about, you're on XFL. You talk. I mean, you're everything that with there's football being played. Emory Hunt's on it, straight up. And I love that about you and the way you go about doing your work. That's why they call you the hardest working guy in the business. I need to know, is there a guy in this draft that you haven't had a chance to really dive into or talk about, but you love him, you love his tape, and you just want to share some thoughts about him?
No, because again, if I'm talking about, I dove into his film. So it's if I hadn't seen him, I won't talk about him. So I will give you a guy that I feel like is not being talked about enough, and he's starting to get a lot more burn as of late with how he did his pro day and then had the second pro day, and that's Cephas Johnson, the third out of Southeastern Louisiana, the quarterback, who was excellent at the College Gridiron Showcase, 6'5", 226, threw the football extremely well, showed that he could play receiver because he did a little bit of that at Southeastern before going back to quarterback and being there full time, and runs in the 4.4. So he has the athleticism. He has a dual threat capability. Game is a cross between a Colin Kaepernick and a Cordell Stewart. Could be a surprise day 3 selection, but I do know this: teams, if he's not drafted, teams will be competing hard for his services as a priority free agent, because he gives you a little bit of that, dual threat capability that you rarely see.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you diving in there. I really want to know from you said that people will be dueling for him later on, like early in the free agency period. Do you believe that you said he might not get drafted? Why wouldn't he get drafted? I mean, based on your scouting report, he sounds great.
Well, yeah, again, the NFL is the NFL. So, I think when teams are drafting, they want more sure bets as opposed to questions. And if you question a player, it kind of pushes that player down, So if you don't have questions, you kind of take those guys and hope that you can compete for those questions in the undrafted free agent market. So that's why you kind of see it, and if guys don't get drafted, doesn't mean they're not good players. There's only so many picks. It's only 7 rounds. So, you know, talented guys won't get drafted. And so it's not a knock on their athletic ability or their football skill. It's just hey, we got to take the for sure bets first before we go into more guys that are kind of questions. Now you start to see a lot of those questions come off the board, maybe in the 6th round, where teams are just trying to okay, let me, instead of competing for this guy, let me secure his services with the draft pick. But there's so many talented players in this country that you only can draft so many. And so you have to compete for those guys. They're going to start calling guys like in the 5th round that they're trying to recruit for undrafted free agents, because that's how deep of a class this is. And just that's how the process works.
Listen, if you're out there listening, then what I want you to do is I want you to follow Mr. Emory Hunt on Twitter, because when it comes to the 5th and 6th and 7th rounds, and CBS or anybody else who wants to talk about those prospects, they'll call Mr. Emory Hunt and get his insight and get his opinion on those guys. He writes a book on the draft. Please, just for a second, Mr. Hunt, tell people where they can find you. What we see your handle right there. But where else can they find your material? Where else can they find your articles? Where else can they find the stuff from you?
They can follow me on Twitter, like you said, at FBall Game Plan. Go and order your copy of Football Game Plan's 2023 Draft Guide, the largest draft guide in existence. It's the industry standard, over 1,000 individual scouting reports. So you'll find scouting reports on guys from Florida State to guys from, Lawrence Tech. We got a ton of colleges in there, a ton of prospects. I've gone to all 8 All-Star games, so you know that I put eyes on a lot of these players live and also on film. Footballgameplan.com/2023 draft guide. And it's a PDF file, by the way, and you'll receive it as soon as you place your order. And for the draft on day 3, you can catch me on CBS Sports HQ all throughout the day.
Love it. And like I said, right, day 3, when they need to know, they go to Emory Hunt. It's just that simple. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir.